Well, I've made a lot of videos talking about how the Fed was going to cut rates, but I was in doubt. I had a lot of doubts because of what was going on in the economy, from people losing their jobs to all sorts of things. Well, last week, the Fed Reserve actually made a pretty big move. They actually cut the interest rates by 25 basis points. But what really has happened since then, if you really pay close attention, has it been good news? Has it been bad? Or is it kind of a bit of both? So let's start with the positives. The markets, for one, loved it. The S&P 500 hit some new highs. That doesn't mean a lot for too many people because not a lot of people are actually invested in the stock market. But even smaller companies grew quite a bit. Investors are feeling pretty optimistic. And then that optimism kind of translated into this lower borrowing costs for mortgage rates. You see some of those started dipping, but then went right back up, which is great news for home buyers for a short bit. Businesses borrowing money, especially home builders, are also seeing some relief, which could help tackle the housing shortage. Oh, and if you're into precious metals, so if you have gold or anything like that, gold, silver, those surged to record highs. Plus, the U.S. dollar kind of softened a bit, which can boost for American exports. So far, so good, right? Yeah, one would think, but not really. So not everyone thinks so, and there definitely are a lot of challenges. Despite the rate cuts, man, inflation is still stubbornly high, above the 2% Fed rate target. The consumer price index is up. The new tariffs that are looming up. People getting tariff dues in their mailboxes. Some worry that we could be heading into a stagflation with all this rising unemployment and high inflation. Not a fun combo. This can make things a lot more complicated. And while the mortgage rates were down for a little bit, it's not a guaranteed trend. If inflation keeps climbing, those rates could easily reverse course. The housing market needs more than just a rate cut. It needs more houses. And what's funny is there's a lot of houses on the market, right? But not at the right price. So even within the Fed Reserve, man, there's disagreement. Some wanted a bigger cut, some were hesitant, and there's kind of a mixed economic signal. So slowing growth, rising unemployment, the future feels a bit uncertain. So while they did cut rates in the past, now they're not really looking very optimistic, man. It's also highlighting the concerns of, inflation, the economy, stability. It just seems that the jury is still out for the long term impact. Right now, too many people are losing their jobs to know what the right answer is. So we'll see.